Aaron Smith of the NCIA, the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, really responsible for fostering legislation for the industry and moving the entire industry forward through legislation. He also goes into his personal life and what led him to the industry. The NCIA is our first sponsor, and we very much appreciate that. Enjoy the episode. Okay, so we've got the Aaron Smith, the Executive Director for the NCIA. Aaron, thanks so much for giving us some time.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
And as you know, we are certainly members of the NCIA, as we recommend everyone listening to join the NCIA. And we'll get to the NCIA in a bit. We want to spend a little bit of time on you personally, right? So you're there in Colorado now, but you're originally California, is that right?
Yeah, I'm originally from the Bay Area in California, which is proudly the birthplace of medical marijuana in this country.
Absolutely. How far back do you go within the movement, and then we'll even trace it back farther as far as you personally?
Yeah, I got involved professionally in marijuana reform in 2005, working for the Marijuana Policy Project, and had done a number of things as a volunteer activist prior to that. And then, of course, NCIA started 5 years later in 2010.
Mm-hmm. And you were well suited to go ahead and become the executive director. As far as the MPP is concerned, before that, I know that you were in the aerospace industry for a little bit. You even flirted with a candidacy, if I'm not mistaken, for the California State Assembly. Right? Is any of that sound familiar?
Yeah. I got involved actually pretty young age. I had a pretty terrible run-in with police, which was, involved cannabis. But, more importantly, I had a, pretty terrible experience with police brutality as a teenager, which led me really down the path of wanting to commit my life to getting, tyrannical government out of our lives. And a big part of that was working toward ending the war on drugs, and which, as I see it, the war on drugs violates so many of our personal liberties. Almost you could look at the Bill of Rights and you can point to every one of them being infringed upon because of these disastrous drug policies. So I started kind of as a libertarian activist and chaired my local Libertarian Party Central Committee in the early 2000s. Did run for office unsuccessfully. I think I got 7%, if I recall, as for the state assembly in 2004, which was a great experience, and it was an opportunity to talk about these issues publicly. While I didn't win, I didn't actually have expectation of winning as a libertarian candidate in a deeply Democratic district. But that said, I was actually I'm proud to say that my role in that campaign led to the person who did win, who's now a state senator, acknowledging that marijuana should be legal during her campaign in 2004. So I think that's kind of the role often of dark horse candidates and third parties in this country.
Absolutely. Take us through who the state senator is and what the platform is and what she's doing now actively.
State Senator Noreen Evans, and she represents I can't remember the number of the district right now, but she represents Sonoma, Napa counties up in Northern California. And she's been, a great ally on medical cannabis issues, and as well as, full regulation of marijuana, which, of course, hasn't, been approved in California yet, but it's only a matter of time. And, when I worked for the Marijuana Policy Project, it was started in 2005. I remember, we were celebrating the first passage of a full marijuana legalization and regulation bill out of committee And that was I believe that was in 2008 or 9. And, that was a big deal. And that wasn't that long ago. It was a huge deal that we got one committee of the state legislature to approve a bill legalizing marijuana. And then here we are, today with 4 states with laws on the books, regulating marijuana for all adults, and, soon many more in 2016.
Yeah, it is unbelievable as far as how much progress has been made, and you're a big part of that. So I want to chronologically go through what we're dotting right now, and if you don't mind, I'd love to get into what did happen when you were a teenager, as much as you want to share with us. Because it'll inform us as to why you're such a big part of the movement, and a passionate part of the movement. And the other thing is, it might help other folks that are, facing the same type of thing that you faced. So you mentioned, a run-in with police, and I think you even used the word brutality. How much can you share with us about what happened?
Yeah, it's not something I talk about a lot, but sure. I was kind of an awkward goth kid with dark hair and eye makeup and black trench coat. This was pre-Columbine, and I was in a fairly small town in Sonoma County where I grew up, which actually, I thought I knew all of the police officers that really regularly patrolled the area. As as teenage kids do, I was out about many nights, but an officer actually pulled up to me when I was walking down the street and jumped out of his car, yelled a lot of profanity at me, and basically told me to put my hands on the hood, and I did. He wouldn't tell me why he was stopping me, and at some point, somehow along the line, I ended up getting hit in the head and thrown to the ground. Next thing I know, I woke up hogtied in the back of a vehicle, of the police vehicle. And what had happened was he had strangled me until I asphyxiated and passed out. The blood vessels in my eyes burst, so I had really super blood red eyes for weeks and weeks after that. And when I ended up getting taken to a hospital where I was drug tested not even against my will, but without even a warning. I was face down, tied with my arms behind my back on a stretcher, and they just stuck a needle in my arm without even saying anything. And then I didn't have my ID on me because I was, not driving, and I was a kid, didn't carry my ID. I did have a small amount of marijuana on me, like maybe a gram or half of a gram, and then that was kind of, what they ended up using to justify what they did. They found out I was a minor. Eventually, they believed me, and they called my parents, who came down with my ID. And at that point, I could tell they kind of freaked out because I think they thought I was older than I was. It's illegal to drug test minors without their consent. So I actually did not get charged with any crimes at all. Because and marijuana is decriminalized in California anyway, although I was a minor. But they, I think that it really was a transformative time in my life where I really started, seeing the brutality of government, and that, while I believe that there is a role in government, it's always really important to understand that whenever we're using government to achieve our social means of any kind, it means we're using force, because that's really the only thing that government has a monopoly on. The government's the only entity in the country that can legally hurt people and kill people and throw people in cages for not doing what the government wants them to do. And I think that that's when it comes to things like national security and keeping violent people off the streets, I think that's entirely appropriate. But when you're talking about victimless crimes like drug crimes, and certainly marijuana crimes, where we're talking about a natural substance that's safer than most prescription drugs, and certainly safer than alcohol, it absolutely makes no sense to to be using the force of government to keep people from using the substance. And so I think that inspired me to get involved in kind of the libertarian, freedom-oriented side of things as an activist, and then and especially the war on drugs. As I mentioned, I think is one of the the biggest, one of the worst violators of human liberty, and certainly one of the worst domestic policies in our country right now.
And now we can certainly understand why that is a personal belief of yours. Thank you for sharing that. And how much of that experience did shape that kind of opinion? Obviously, an experience like that is going to change somebody. Did you have any thoughts about the war on drugs or political leanings before this? Or, how much did it change, or how much did it just reinforce what you already thought?
I mean, I guess it kind of did reinforce what I already thought. I believed that marijuana should be legal. I wasn't politically active. I mean, I was 16 years old, but I smoked pot, certainly. Most of the people in my community and in my parents' community up there in Northern California hold the same belief. It's kind of a given up that way. But I think it actually made me start thinking about the bigger picture, and not just about, marijuana should be legal because I like it. Marijuana should be legal because it's an inherent right of a human being to put any substance into their body that they see fit. And that if we have these basic tenets in this country, and one of them is personal freedom, I don't think if you don't have the ability to put a substance in your own body and have ownership over your own body, well, I don't think you really have many freedoms at all, because that should be the really one of the core freedoms that any person has, whether they be in this country or anywhere else.
That's very well put. And you did mention this, when this happened, you started to get active in the Libertarian Party, I guess, in Sonoma. What were the first things that you started to do as either a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, or whenever you did start to get active?
Yeah, I mean, I got really, I guess, politically active more around 18, 19 years old, and at that point, I met some folks that were running the ground campaign for the Prop 215 initiative. I helped gather signatures for that, but really, as a very rank and file volunteer, and then got a bit more involved later on in my early 20s, and started taking things a little bit more seriously. I do remember, I think, when Prop 215 was on the ballot in '96, and I did meet some great people that connected me with how to go out and collect signatures and do this kind of work. I do remember at that time thinking, geez, this just doesn't go far enough, because I thought all drugs should be legal, and not being particularly pragmatic as an 18-year-old, I thought that this just doesn't go far enough, and it was a shame that it's only medical cannabis. I've clearly developed my thinking around the realm of political possibilities and political strategy since then, and then I got involved with the Libertarian Party, which after running for office I became a bit disenchanted with, because it's it seemed like a lot of to be honest with you, a lot of kooky folks that weren't really focused on being strategic and actually affecting change, and then really, decided that while I still have a lot of these ideological viewpoints that I share with, libertarian activists, that I decided that I wanted to take a more pragmatic and strategic approach to making the country a freer place, and that would be through single issue advocacy, and of course that single issue for me is marijuana legalization. And I when I got involved with MPP, to be honest, I saw medical cannabis as primarily like a strategy and a stepping stone toward broader reform that was needed, and that was kind of the the way I thought of it when going into it was just as a tactic, and I read about, I knew that, that the medical efficacy of cannabis was a real thing. I didn't deny that, but my primary thought process around it was like, this is just a tactic. But as soon as I got involved with MPP and on the ground, out there meeting patients and organizing patients to come out to public hearings and these sorts of things, my thinking really completely changed, and I saw how this really does improve people's lives and how important it is to them.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We've only had a few conversations up here at the beginning of this thing, and already, cancer, Crohn's, colitis, MS, PTSD, all of these things have come up in conversation over the course of just a few conversations. It's very, very easy to see cannabis as medicine.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially when you you start meeting people who and seeing their transformation. You meet them before they had access to cannabis, and then you can see how it really improves their quality of life so dramatically. And it for me, it actually became quite emotional, where I'd find myself really worked up emotionally at the end of a lot of days. When I was doing medical marijuana work in California. A lot of my job was getting patients to come out and meet with, either show up at a town hall meeting and speak out, or come out to a city council meeting, or go to Sacramento and meet with their representative. And we were, really like, these people were disabled. A lot of them were in wheelchairs. And I was constantly pressuring them to, get on our bus and go and, do this political work. And it was really kind of offensive that patients should have to go through that, especially, really seriously ill and disabled people should have to go through so much just to advocate for the freedom to use the medicine that their doctor recommended. And it became quite taxing emotionally, just being, in the thick of it all of the time. But at the same time, it also provides inspiration to keep doing the work.
Without question. And I rattled off a few there, and I missed epilepsy, of course. But seeing that, really in person and really truly being a part of that, how did that further crystallize your thought process? How did that change your thought process? I mean, that, being with patients really does change you had your own experience, but then, to see folks that are affected, in the moment every day, what further kind of lessons did you pull from that?
Well, I certainly stopped thinking of it so much as just a tactic toward legalization, though, the case can be made that it still is also that, but that was not my primary thinking anymore. But also seeing folks who, truly ill and disabled people, and seeing the need for them to have access to this through, some kind of a safe and open environment, such as a medical cannabis collective in California, or dispensary, and how absolutely important that is, because a lot of the patient activists and the people who you might see at events and conferences and on TV, a lot of those folks are growing their own medicine, but somebody who just gets a soccer mom who just got diagnosed with with breast cancer, and has no knowledge of growing cannabis, is not going to be able to just all of a sudden have a green thumb and produce medicinal grade cannabis, certainly not in the time that she would need it. And so it really underscores the importance that it's not only legal to consume this medicine, but also to be able to purchase it through a regulated market.
Mm-hmm. Without question. So as far as 2005, 2006, you're, with patients. How did, the conversation change from 2005 to 2007 to 2009? How take us through that arc at
Yeah,
MPP.
we started. One of the things we were doing then was just getting counties to acknowledge that they had to implement certain aspects of Proposition 215, as well as Senate Bill 420. By the way, is the name of the Senate bill that followed up Prop 215, which allowed for collectives and cooperatives and the exchange of money for cannabis, and it also required counties to implement ID card programs that patients can opt into to have an ID card that protects them from arrest. And California is very diverse politically, at least regionally. We think of it as a blue state, but there's Los Angeles and Southern California, and then there's the Bay Area. But everything in between is, you might as well be in Texas when you're talking to folks about issues like this. And so a lot of my job was going out and finding people to start lobbying their county boards of supervisors to implement this program, which at least put the counties on record for having to acknowledge that this is state law that they have to follow, because a lot of the local governments, and still today, feel like it's they don't need to follow Prop 215. It didn't pass in my county, so it's not anything I have to worry about. But they don't have the autonomy of a state. The county is a division of the state, and so that was a lot of the conversation was just about getting acknowledging that this law is on the books, that you have to implement the ID card program. You can't arrest people when they have an ID card. You can't just ignore the law, even if you're in a place like Fresno County or Madera, Merced County in the Central Valley. And that started to get better and better, and then it really shifted into also, where do patients get the medicine? If you're not going to arrest them, you can't under the law. Where are they going to find access to it? And getting some sensible ordinances on the books locally to allow for dispensaries to be established and operate openly in a regulated way that serves patients well.
Yeah. So, I do want to take this political tangent because you brought up the center of California, might as well be Texas. But as I've gotten to know, the folks that are really at the spearhead of the movement here, and then the business leaders associated with it. So, you're proving through this conversation your libertarian bona fides. If we didn't know it before, we definitely know it now. As far as Tripp grew up kind of on the right side of things. Scott Van Rixel said that he would never vote for a Democrat. This is not a left-wing thing. What are your thoughts on that? That is something that I've found fascinating.
Oh, I don't think this is a left-wing thing. I think that this is a freedom issue, and it's not just about personal freedom to use substances that you see fit, but also about state autonomy, and that we have a federalist system of government where states are allowed to create their own systems around marijuana and many other policy areas, and the federal government should stay out of it. And that's been a basic fundamental tenet of Republican politics and Republican messaging. It baffles me that that I think that a lot of most of the Republicans still to this date are hypocritical. And this is, they've allowed the Democrats to take this issue, but I think we're starting to see, when you look at candidates for president like Rand Paul, we're starting to see a shift away from this being just a Democratic issue, and Republicans that look at the same polling numbers we look at and see that, this is not only a safe position to take, certainly on medical cannabis and on the rights of states to regulate their industries, but it's actually a politically advantageous one. And I think we're going to see a shift away from this being seen as a Democratic issue. The Democrats bring us things like laws that say you can't smoke tobacco on your own private property, in places like San Francisco and Berkeley, where they have super majority control. That's not really a not in the spirit of freedom in this country. So, I think that cannabis really is a transpartisan issue. If the Democrats are able to allow people to consume this as a personal choice, and Republicans, even if they have moral issues around it or not, they should respect states' laws that have already enacted medical and adult use laws across the country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I definitely want to talk to you about your take on each state, or at least highlight a few states in a bit. But first, I want to talk about that inflection point, your personal inflection point from MPP to NCIA in 2010. How did that happen? Take us through that, the entire process there.
Yeah, in 2000, after Obama was inaugurated, especially, we really started seeing different types of operators coming into the industry. And I mean, at that time, we didn't call it an industry; it was a movement. But we started hearing people calling it an industry, and it seemed kind of weird at first. And but there were great operations in the Bay Area where I come from, like Berkeley Patients Group and Spark and Harborside. Great medical cannabis operations that were really being operated like ordinary businesses,
Right.
and actually not, extraordinary businesses, because they not only were operating professionally, but they were also giving back to their community and invested in political advocacy and all sorts of great things. But it was until 2009, it seemed very isolated to, the Bay Area. Maybe a couple places in Southern California that really operated like an above-board business. But after 2009, Colorado, the Colorado industry started flourishing, and that was a for-profit industry. Washington, Montana, and other states, really started, we started seeing these bigger businesses forming there. And we saw investment money coming in from more traditional sources than you would have seen before. Operators of cannabis businesses that came out of other industries, and I think that was also because of the economic downturn of the time. A lot of folks that were in real estate development and other sectors that weren't doing so well started getting involved in cannabis, and really started treating it like a real business, and wanting to pay their taxes and give employee benefits to their employees, and do everything above board and within the the confines of the state laws and local regulations. We also saw a emergence of other issues that weren't really being focused on by other traditional advocacy groups, such as the unfair provision of the tax code, Section 280E, which doesn't allow business deductions for ordinary operating expenses, and that was starting to affect a lot of businesses as the IRS was conducting audits throughout California at that time, and later Colorado, and the banking access issue, and so these issues were really front and center to the business community that had emerged out of this movement, but not so front and center to the traditional advocates and the philanthropists who had supported, that have traditionally supported the marijuana legalization movement. They were more focused on, let's get legalization in the next state. So we saw really an opportunity and a need, a vacuum that needed to be filled by having a trade association come in and represent this business community as a new constituency looking to reform these obscene marijuana laws. And so I worked with Steve Fox and Rob Campia at MPP, and we put together bylaws and the first initial board of directors from which were business owners from across the country in late 2010, really to respond to this need, and then the rest was history.
The rest of it is history, and we certainly want to go ahead and document it. And Steve Fox does some work with Vicente Cedarburg, of course, and Rob Campy is heading up the MPP as we speak, and I think he's even running for a board seat for the NCIA this time around. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And we really pride ourselves on being truly representative of our membership. So we do have a board election right now. Rob is one of the candidates. I believe we have 24 candidates for 11 open seats. And so voting is happening until the end of this week. And that's something that I really am proud of. While it's unique, most nonprofits and even trade associations don't have such an open democratic process, and I'm proud that we've been able to establish that.
And you also have a candidate that's toggling both the NCIA and local politics as well. You want to get into that at all?
I actually prefer not to talk about board candidates, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
Because, it's like
that's fine. We'll leave that alone.
Neutral position.
Totally. I'm excited about Kayvon. Is the point there? And I mean in local politics. What about just focusing on that? He's running for city council, correct?
Well, he was. Unfortunately, he did not make it into the runoff. So, but I think he got over 10,000 votes, or maybe I think 11,000 votes in Denver, and ran a not very traditional campaign. So I'm still impressed by that, and I think that it really is only a matter of time before you start seeing cannabis business owners elected to public office, and I think Denver is. Makes sense, would be the first major city to have that, being the epicenter of the cannabis industry. And actually, another one of our members out in Sebastopol, we're talking about my past, but Sebastopol, California is Sonoma County, where I'm from, is Robert Jacob, who's the executive director of Peace and Medicine. He's actually the vice mayor, I believe, of Sebastopol. Of course, that's just a little hippie community out there. In West Sonoma County, but yeah, I think that Denver, is ripe for that, and it's too bad that Kayvon didn't make it this time, but I think he's probably established himself for a good run next time, and like I said, it's really only a matter of time. You see other major industries, or other candidates for public office from major industries that have a root connection to the city, and it's only a matter of time before the cannabis industry is playing at that level too.
Absolutely, and just to take one of your comments, you said the rest is history as far as the NCIA. Let's talk about that working history as we are in it, as we speak. The two central issues you brought up are two issues that are still being dealt with: banking and 280E. Your choice. Which one do you want to take first? Because we're going to talk about both.
There's been, the banking issue affects almost everybody in the cannabis industry, not just the what we call direct-to-plant businesses that sell cannabis, but even ancillary businesses. And NCIA ourselves have even had some issues around banking. And it's also an issue that has a lot of support for reform, even among those who weren't so happy about marijuana becoming legal. People, like Governor Hickenlooper, in Colorado, who opposed Amendment 64 and has not been a big champion of the industry, is a big champion for banking reform, because nobody wants to see this industry have to be an all cash industry because of not only the public safety issues that causes, but also transparency issues that for regulators and tax collectors that want to be able to track money through bank accounts like they can everything else. So, we've seen some reform from the Department of Treasury, which put out some guidance in February of last year, kind of laying out sort of a roadmap for how banks can do business with the industry. Unfortunately, it required really onerous reporting and regulatory requirements that I think most banks, did not want to, be burdened with. So it really didn't have the effect of opening the floodgates to bank accounts as as obviously we would have hoped. But there are some smaller banks that are kind of more quietly opening up accounts and filing the paperwork with the federal government in order to be compliant. But what we really need is legislative reform. And Congressman Perlmutter introduced the Marijuana Business Access to Banking Act during NCIA's fifth annual lobby days last week. He announced the introduction of that with 100 cannabis industry professionals that were in D.C. to lobby on his behalf. And we expect a Senate companion bill to be introduced actually any day now from Senator Merkley from Oregon. And that's pretty... this year is really the year that the Senate is taking up marijuana. There's also 280E bills, which we can talk about later. But it's actually pretty significant progress because the Senate has never taken up really any substantive marijuana reform legislation in its history, and certainly has never taken up these important industry issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys have been going down every year. You said 5 years of lobby days. Obviously that's having some effect. In addition to that, why do you think this year is a special year? Is it because of over a full year of adult use / recreational? What do you think is the reasoning in addition to lobby days?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a lot of the senators and members of the House of Representatives are understanding that this is the direction the country's going, and it can't be stopped at this point. And now there are vital issues, especially this banking issue, that have to be addressed. And also we see as new state laws pass, really thanks to MPP and the Drug Policy Alliance for continuing to pass state laws, they bring their congressional delegation with them. And so, for example, Senator Jeff Merkley and Senator Ron Wyden are both co-sponsoring marijuana industry-related bills. They're both from Oregon. Senator Wyden has a 280E bill. Senator Merkley will have the banking bill shortly. And they weren't as interested in this a couple of years ago because Oregon hadn't legalized full adult use marijuana yet. Now it's in their backyard, and they realize that they have to deal with it. And as we see new states come on, we'll continue to see broader support in Congress, and we will continue to keep working in Congress on behalf of the industry to make sure that the industry's message is out there, and that we're talking about this, and it's framed in framed as a business issue that elected officials really, it's a lot easier for many of them to understand business issues than social justice issues. Right. So we're in there talking about tax revenue that we're generating, jobs that we're creating, real estate occupancy, these sorts of things that are real tangible benefits to the reformed marijuana policies.
Yeah, and further to that end, take us through 280E, where you took us through the beginning of it. Where is it now? And you mentioned Senator Wyden, but just give us the overview, and then kind of maybe even your point of view.
Yeah, so 280E, has been on the books since the early 80s, and 2008, 9, 10 started really being utilized by the IRS to penalize marijuana-related businesses. And it's created a situation where, we have members who are paying upwards of 80% effective tax rate, people who might actually have made no profit, still end up being saddled with $50,000 tax bills at the end of the year. And it's pretty amazing that this industry is flourishing in the way that it has, despite 280E, because you talk about this with other business people, and they can't even believe that these businesses are even able to survive under this provision. Unlike the banking issue, it's a bit more challenging in that we've sought administrative relief from the IRS on this issue years ago. That was one of the first things NCIA was involved in, trying to get the IRS to come out with an opinion that 280E wouldn't be applied to state legal businesses, and the IRS basically sent back a letter saying no, Congress has to change the law, which really isn't entirely incorrect, and that's what we've been working on is building support in Congress, as well as through really putting a spotlight on 280E's effect on the economies in places like Colorado, Washington, and California that have large marijuana industries within them, and really getting that into the news media. There was a New York Times story over the weekend about 280E that was, a lot of the sources came from a white paper that we put out recently on that, really just showing, how this impacts not only the businesses and the business owners, but the community, because it impacts their ability to create jobs and give better benefits to their employees and expand their businesses, et cetera. So right now, where things stand is we have a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate, the Small Business Tax Equity Acts, one introduced by Congressman Earl Blumenauer, and then Senator Wyden has the Senate companion bill. And, we're continuing to pound the pavement in D.C. and trying to get more and more co-sponsors for this. But it is, I'll be honest, it's been an uphill battle because it really, unlike the banking issue, which is looks like a clear and present danger, it's taking a lot more education for members of Congress to understand why 280E affects them and their communities, not just marijuana business owners. But that's what we're here to do, is to keep pushing that message forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you make a good point about the banking. You can just showcase basically this is putting people in physical danger. As far as taxation, it's a tougher hill to climb. Totally understood there. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's about making sure they know, this isn't a tax cut for marijuana businesses. This is tax parity, and it's to us in the industry, it seems like a no-brainer, but you've got committee members on the House Ways and Means Committee. Most of them aren't from states that have marijuana industries at all, and that's the committee with jurisdiction over the tax code. So it definitely makes it a big challenge, but we're getting taken more seriously every day, every time we meet and talk about this on Capitol Hill, and our members come out for lobby days once a year. And every year they remark, especially those who've been coming for a long time, will remark on how much more receptive the offices are this year than they were last year. And it's been that way year after year, and I'm proud to have been part of making that happen.
Absolutely. And that's your work on a national level, on a federal level, and let's break it down into states. You've mentioned Colorado, Washington. We've talked about Oregon, and then of course there's Alaska. Let's start there. That's a bright red state. Talk about where they are now and what your perception is.
Yeah, Alaska's, I think, always had that kind of libertarian streak, so I wasn't too surprised that the initiative passed. I know they're still well over a year out before there's real implementation, but we're getting a lot of interest from people out there in Alaska looking to get involved in the industry and involved in our association. And I've seen some folks. I've met some folks from up there coming down to our events, and we will ultimately, probably after our big summer conference, do some kind of an event in Alaska, just to get up there and meet folks, and talk to them about the work that we're doing nationally. It is sort of an isolated state. Juneau and Anchorage are even isolated, so it'll be an interesting market in that regard, where it's a fairly small population. They're condensed in these two cities for the most part, that you need a plane to fly from one to the other. So yeah, definitely looking forward to having Alaska on board, as well as Oregon too, which is I think it'll probably be a little bit easier for Oregon to implement, as they have a pretty good medical system in place right now. As Alaska does not have that.
That's a perfect segue, because what I wanted to ask you was, as far as medical, the states that do have medical programs, who's doing it especially well? Who can you highlight?
I think that Colorado's doing things really well. and has been kind of in the in the thick of things for a long time, and especially given that Colorado didn't have the same institutional support that Washington I-502 had. The Colorado Initiative Amendment 64 was opposed by almost everybody, elected officials, from the mayor of Denver up to the governor, and even those who are now supportive were at best neutral during the campaign. But they've really done a great job at implementing sensible regulations, adjusting things when they aren't so sensible, and taking the industry's perspective into account when drafting regulations and rules, and actually giving the industry a seat at the table. And no, it's not perfect, the rules and regs here, but I've been pretty impressed with the way that Colorado's rolled things out. And if you look at Washington as a comparison, and they've both passed their initiatives on the same night, it's 180 degrees different. And I hope that things will get better in Washington, but you've got businesses there that are that going out of business before they even have an opportunity to get into business because of I think a government manufactured crisis within the industry. And I think a lot of it has to do with them not taking the needs of the viewpoints of the industry into account as a major stakeholder in all of this when they drafted the rules and frankly the law I-502 itself.
Yeah, we're going to get on-site perspective from John Davis pretty soon here, so we're excited about that as far as Washington is concerned. You highlighted Colorado. Who else is kind of leading the way as far as medical, in your opinion?
I think Oregon's doing a great job in having regulated the way that they're regulating their market, and I think it will be once the adult sales are also regulated. I think Oregon may end up being one of the more business friendly states. Same with Nevada. Nevada doesn't have the medical stores aren't up and running yet, but it's a great law. It has a barrier to entry, but it wasn't outrageous. They have the ability for patients from other states to purchase medicine in Nevada, which I think is great. And I'm hopeful that Nevada will also be an adult use state after 2016, and at which point they'll have, let's hope, a very smoothly operating medical system in place that they'll be able to flip the switch on. And a lot of the, California, of course, is kind of it's all over the place, but that's by far the biggest, marijuana market. I think that the city of Los Angeles sells more cannabis than the entire state of Colorado, and so, but I'm hopeful that will that California will also regulate from a state level both medical and adult use marijuana by 2016, and hopefully medical even sooner.
Yeah, and California kind of goes county by county. It's almost like its own group of states, as far as I understand it. So, is it Berkeley? Is it Sonoma? Where are the kind of places that it's absolutely working?
Yeah, I mean, the Bay Area really has the best regulations so far, and I think that's there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's partly just the political climate with the the Bay Area politicians and elected officials have always been more supportive of medical marijuana access, and then also the industry there has been much more politically engaged and proactive about working as advocates than they were in Southern California. In Southern California, you had a lot of really just bad apples, I think, opening up all over illegally, and really putting a black eye on the whole industry and the movement, and that was kind of the rule in Southern California. As in the Bay Area, that's the exception. And right. But I think we're seeing Southern California also getting better and better, and Los Angeles starting to enforce its regulations, and finally, so I think California is on the right track, yet just much disappointment that it's taken so long.
We're getting there, though. We're getting there. Just a few more questions. One off, you mentioned Montana during our conversation. Can you just give us your point of view of what's going on there specifically?
Well, unfortunately, Montana doesn't actually have much of a thriving industry, or even close to thriving industry, and it's the state law didn't allow for dispensaries really per se. I think I mentioned Montana because back when NCIA was founded, there were some kind of an emergence of an industry there at that time, but there was federal raids and local raids and crackdowns. So my understanding now is I think everybody, unfortunately, medical cannabis is obtained through more underground operations, and I know there's collectives and stuff that are serving patients to the best they can, but certainly it's not out out in the open as it is in a state with better laws on the books like California or Colorado.
No, understood there. And then as far as what's next, where are we going? Medical, what states should we be looking at?
Well, I mean, I think that we'll see the implementation of medical marijuana in Illinois and New York and finally Massachusetts, and in the year ahead. And I think those are really the places to watch. As these eastern states have really onerous regulations on the businesses and sometimes on the qualifying conditions for patients. So I think there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road there in those states, and there already has been. But ultimately, especially Illinois and Massachusetts will, ultimately be, I think, really good markets for the industry. And then, of course, going into the next election cycle, you'll have Florida. It looks like it'll be on the ballot again in Florida, and I think that it has a much better chance of passing than last year because it'll be a presidential election cycle. Perhaps Ohio. There's a couple competing initiatives in Ohio happening. One looking to get on the ballot this year, and then another one for the following year. I think that 2016 is better no matter what in terms of getting any marijuana reform legislation through. So yeah, it's going to be just as exciting as it has been over the last couple years. I think we've got a few more years of that to go before we finally get to the point where the things are normalized and cannabis and the industry are legal across the country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to go back to Florida, it didn't quite pass last time. Your thoughts there are, based on when the vote took place, meaning once we get a presidential election, once we get those feet to the polls, that should change things. It didn't have necessarily anything to do with the legislation itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it failed to only because it didn't reach 60%. But
right.
that's a huge reach, and it came very close. So I think that in a presidential election cycle, of course, there's just a bigger turnout, especially of younger people who just don't vote in the midterms, and younger
right.
people we know, demographically, are much more likely to support reforming the marijuana laws.
Okay, and then to that end, as far as adult use, as far as recreational, where should we be looking as far as next states?
Well, all eyes are on California as the biggest prize, really. I mean,
right.
That's like I said before. As far as from an industry perspective, the market in California is 10 times bigger than Colorado, and really the elephant in the room. So I mean, that's the biggest prize. But there'll also be states like Nevada and Arizona and perhaps Massachusetts and Maine that I know that Marijuana Policy Project is looking at. And I think those are ours to lose as well. I think it's really important, though, for people to understand that this isn't inevitable, and it's absolutely important for the industry to not only invest in the federal work that NCIA is doing, but also invest in the state level work. If they're looking to expand their businesses into other states, these businesses need to invest in the work that Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and these campaigns are doing to make it possible. Because if we don't get a state law passed, then there will be no industry in that state. And it's as simple as that. And these things cost a lot of money, and especially California, where this will cost 5-6 times what it costs in Colorado and Washington to get a bill passed. It could be $10 million to get an initiative passed in California, just because of the TV ad buys and all of that. And to be honest, in Florida, same thing. It's a huge state. We do see a lot of people like rushing into this and excited about making money, but not seeing the need to invest in making it possible for there to be an industry. And we had people in Florida calling us, saying, "How do I get rich? How do I want to make money in the Florida industry." Well, make sure there is an industry by donating to the campaign, because if it doesn't pass, there will be no industry. And so that's going to continue to be really important for the businesses in this space to continue to support the efforts they're supporting now, but to step it up next year, because California is ours to lose, but it's going to take a lot of money, and I'm very concerned that if we don't push it over the finish line, it will change the dialogue around the narrative around marijuana reform as there's a big turn in the tide, because everybody sees California as as this blue state and this leading state, and that a loss there could set not just California back, but the country back years. And so it's absolutely vital that we invest in that.
And a good place to start is to become a member, like we are, like I am, of the NCIA. Aaron, you and the NCIA have been kind enough to sponsor this episode of the podcast. We appreciate that, and we urge everybody to say thank you along with us by joining the NCIA without question. Anytime I'm in a room, as you well know, I urge folks to join the effort. Right?
Appreciate that, Seth. Anybody can join NCIA quickly online and also find out more about the work we're doing at thecannabisindustry.org, and appreciate all of your support.
All right, so 2 last questions. They are the same words, but one is about cannabis, one is about life. You've taken us through a lot, and thanks so much for your time. What has most surprised you in cannabis over the years that you've been involved? What has most surprised you in cannabis?
I think just the exponential rate of progress. I obviously wouldn't have gotten into this if I didn't think we were going to eventually win. But I was actually very pleasantly surprised when I look back 10 years ago and thinking about where we would be now. I didn't then imagine that we would be in a situation where there would be a National Cannabis Industry Association representing almost 1,000 businesses and talking about this as like a serious business issue, and much less 4 states that have legalized adult use. And so that's definitely a pleasant surprise, and I think it's just always a reminder that things do happen exponentially. Change happens exponentially, not incrementally, and sometimes it gets faster than you'll ever imagine.
That's it. And last question, you've been doing this for the past 10 years, so that's a lot of time. But overall, what has most surprised you in life?
Well, I've been there's challenges here and there, but I continue to I guess maybe even surprise myself a little bit with the ability to kind of find fulfillment even in some of the days that are darker doing this kind of work. There were some really rough times with NCIA in the first couple of years where I wasn't sure we were going to continue to do this because the industry was not really coming together as quickly as I thought it would. But I continue to find a way to find satisfaction, at least personally, even in those times that are extremely stressful. And even now that we're, a pretty successful organization, believe me, there are still days that are extremely stressful and kind of dark. And So it's always just really important to see the bigger picture and realize, what we're here to do is really important and is going to affect lives long after we're dead and gone. And continuing to draw some inspiration from that is important.
There you go, and thanks for opening up a little bit, Aaron. I appreciate you telling us about yourself and how that informs what you personally are doing at the NCIA and the big picture about what's going on there and kind of how all of us can get involved. Really appreciate your time today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you down the line. How about that?
Great, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Aaron Smith. That's a busy guy, and he's doing a lot, as you well heard. Really appreciate him opening up and sharing with us really a pivotal moment in his life and what has led him to today and tomorrow, as well as what has helped us find what is legal cannabis across a fair amount of the United States.